This is Reformed Studios coming to you live onto your screens from Lusaka, Zambia, and we are glad that you could make the time for this evening's program. We took a break last week and we are back this week. And the topic we are looking at this evening is entitled Getting Out of a Debt Trap. Our guest for this evening is Mr. Bobbline Cheembela. Good evening, Mr. Cheembela.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Chiluba, and good evening to everybody that is following us. Thank you.
Thank you. Debt is a severe problem in our culture and everywhere we look, from most governments of nations to individuals. People are in debt, and the consequences of debt range from mild to severe. And debt in itself, as we know it, is known by so many terminologies. Others, if I can add, refer to a mortgage as a debt, or personal loan as a debt, and even car over as a debt. To help us navigate our way through this subject this evening, like I mentioned, is Mr. Bobbline Cheembela, who I would ask to just say briefly something about himself.
Thank you so much for that. My name is Bobbline Cheembela. I'm a Christian and I'm currently congregating with Kabata Baptist Church, where I see the church as a deacon. I've been with Kabata Baptist Church for quite a number of years. Out in terms of professionally, I am a chartered accountant, and I have spent, I think, probably more than half my working life in the financial services sector. Right now, I am working for Access Bank in Zambia, where I do a role of a deputy managing director. Thanks.
Thank you. I have with me a couple of Bible passages that I'm not going to read, but I'll just shout them out for the sake of our viewers, and then we can get going as we look at this topic. Exodus 22, verse 14, this one I would read. It reads as follows: If a man borrows anything of his neighbor, and it is injured or dies, the owner not being with it, he shall make full restitution. We also have Deuteronomy 15, 1 and 2 that I won't read. It's just for the sake of those who like taking notes. We have Samuel 22, verse 1 and 2. We have Colossians in the New Testament, chapter 2, verse 13 and 14. And then we have Psalm 37 and 21, which reads, The wicked borrows but does not pay back, but the righteous is generous and gives. Then we have the last one, Proverbs 22, verse 7. It reads, The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is a slave to the lender. Uncle Bob, I wanted to get these passages to us because I know that borrowing is strictly what precedes what we are now talking about, a debt. It has been said that not all debt is bad debt. Is there such a thing as good debt and bad debt? If you could briefly explain that to us and the viewers.
Okay, no, thank you so much for that question. And thanks for the scriptures that you have read. I think even me, as I was preparing for this, there are other scriptures that I looked at,
Right.
especially in Timothy, First Timothy, and also in Philippians chapter 4, which deal with the subject of contentment and not desiring to be rich and so forth. So, from my perspective and through experience, I think that debt only becomes bad when it becomes unaffordable, when somebody can't afford the debt that they've incurred and
Right.
they fail to pay back, like you read in that scripture in Exodus. But generally, let me maybe talk about some of the good aspects of debt. To begin with, one interesting thing is that when I started work, I used to view my salary in terms of the monthly pay. Like how, if someone asked me how much do you get,
Mm-hmm.
I said when we were starting out working, that was not really a secret. It's like we were easily sharing that information. When someone asked me how much do you get, I would tell them my monthly salary. Now
Right.
I recall that when I joined the bank, then I think I joined Barclays Bank back in the day. And what I found there is that whenever I asked anybody, like in terms of my colleagues, how much do you get? Instead of telling me the monthly pay, they would always tell me their annual pay. That's the figure that stuck. So if I was asking, no, but I want to see how much you get per month, they would
Right.
basically get a calculator, punch in the annual pay, and divide it by 12. Then I asked to say that, but why do you think about the annual pay? Then one of the explanations I got was something along the lines of, I think the world over, people think of, let's say, what they will earn in 1 year.
Okay.
And depending on what they will earn in 1 year, they can plan to take on debt. Like, let me give an example. Let's say you want to buy a car. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that car, for simplicity's sake, let's say you can save for 12 months, and at the end of 12 months, go and buy the car outright. The other way is you know how much you earn in 12 months. You can borrow now, have the car, and then that amount you're supposed to be saving goes towards paying your loan.
You
And
continue
you
paying
have
per
your car
month.
at the beginning. Yeah, you pay per month, but you have the asset in terms of the car and you are enjoying it. Then there's also debt, which I might call uh, sort of productive debt. And I've seen some people use it, which is essentially maybe the concept on which banks run. So the idea is, like there's a proliferation of village banking groups in our day, especially amongst women,
Yes.
but I think this has extended to men as well. Now, each banking group has got its own interest rate. So you find that village banking group A has an interest of 5%. The next one has got an interest of 10%. So somebody who is smart, they can go to the group and borrow at 5%, a huge sum of money,
Mm-hmm.
and then get that entire money and go and invest it in the village banking for 10%. So what have they done there? That debt that they've borrowed, they'll pay at 5%. Where they have invested, they'll earn 10%. That difference of 5% becomes a margin for them. So that's a way of productively using debt. That's what I would say. So debt is only bad if it becomes unaffordable.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. And as a build up to that particular question of is there such a thing as good debt and bad debt? From your experience, having worked so long in the banking sector, what are some of the common mistakes, in this case, financial mistakes, that you have seen that can lead people, including Christians, so to speak, to fall into debt?
Okay. No, thanks for that. So, from my perspective, like the scriptures I quoted earlier, I think both of them talk about contentment. Now, for me, the way I would look at it is that debt becomes bad when somebody starts living a lifestyle that is beyond their earnings. Let me give
Okay.
an example. Let's say you earn, for argument's sake, you earn 10,000 kwacha a month. And then with that 10,000 kwacha, you decide to go and rent a house for 9,000 kwacha in Kablonga, right?
Right.
Meanwhile, at the same time, you could easily go and rent a house for 2,000 kwacha in another neighborhood. Now, if you look at that from the way to go, for you to survive, so like after you pay your rent, you remain with a little amount. For you to survive, you may need to borrow. Now, that kind of borrowing is basically borrowing which is beyond your means. And
Okay.
what may happen there is that that debt may spiral out of control. You start living a life where you borrow from A, the next month, instead of paying that person you've borrowed from, you go and borrow from another person to pay the first person. And that cycle goes on until it gets to a stage where you run out of where to borrow and then you start
Right.
defaulting. Yeah, yes. So the bottom line for me is the common mistakes people
Contentment.
make. It's yes, contentment and not living within their means.
Okay. Would you like to add something else apart from contentment?
So apart from contentment, as I said, it's. I think I just want to overemphasize the point of living within your means. Like in life, there is such a thing as station in life where God has placed us.
Yeah.
So, and what that does is that all of us can survive in any given station in life. Let me take, for instance, even just basic products, right?
Right.
Uh, if if you go for, let's say you want to go out for a meal, if you go to a particular restaurant, you can buy your T-bone steak and chips and whatever. You may end up, for argument's sake, spending a 200 kwacha. You
Mm-hmm.
go to a five-star hotel for the same meal, you are going to spend maybe 2,000 kwacha. Now, there, if you look at the substance of it, is that both people have enjoyed the meal, but the
Yeah.
cost of that meal is different because of the place where that meal has been accessed. Now, sometimes, if as individuals we fail to properly gauge, I think the common term which is used in slang is, which I hear is called the Tama level. If we fail to gauge our level, we
Right.
start playing at a level we are not at, sometimes for the sake of impressing the people around and so forth, then
Yeah.
we are creating a problem for ourselves. Yeah, so the key is by all means living within our means, and living within our means basically means that all of us earn a certain level of income. If our expenses are below our income, then we'll not have a problem. Even if we go into debt, we can afford it. But the moment our expenses exceed our monthly income, then we have a problem. Yeah.
Thank you. This is Reformed Studios, and we are live coming onto your screens, and we are grateful for your viewership. Please comment, like, and share, and let us know from which part of the world you might be watching us from. For those that may have questions, you can do the usual by just throwing in your questions, and we'll see if we can get some of your questions as we move along. Now, Mr. Cheembela, um, what biblical principles do you believe are essential for managing finances, and thus one avoiding getting into debt? I know you have touched on quite a bit on contentment, living within your means. Now, for the sake of some people out there, we need some biblical principles that you can share with the viewers that you believe are essential for managing finances and thus avoiding sliding into debt.
Okay. Yes. No, no thanks. So in fact, it's basically just overemphasizing, I think, those same principles. Now, the Bible talks a lot about contentment. Now, sometimes contentment may not necessarily mean that we become lazy and we don't aspire to improve ourselves or improve our station in life. That's not
I
what
like that.
is meant by yeah, yeah. It essentially just means that at every point we should ensure that we are good stewards of the resources that we are given. And I think if you look at the Bible, it's very full of, I think, what I might call advice about stewardship. We should be good stewards of everything. There's even a story of, I think, the people who are given talents, and that's really about stewardship. So even in terms of the resources we have, if we are good stewards, Uh, I think there's a sense. I think there's one of. I think at the conclusion of one of those parables about people who are given talent, there's a saying that I think the one who had more is given to them. That
Right.
one who had less, even the little he had was taken away. Now, in my life, what I have seen is that if we are good stewards with little, there's a sense in which we'll be good stewards with plenty. If if with the little that we have, we are not utilizing it properly based on the way God would want us to live, and we basically tell ourselves that no, when we get more money, that's when we are going to be responsible. So in this case, let me give an example of say tithing. I got saved when I was a student in back in college, and we used to come into some money as students. And I remember the people that were over us in those days would basically tell us that if as a student you develop the discipline of tithe, no matter how little you get,
Right.
when you start getting into more money, chances are that that discipline will be there and you carry it on. But if you are not disciplined and so forth with little, even when you get plenty, it will not be enough. So, what am I saying? Let me give an example. If let's say somebody earns 10,000 kwacha and they are in serious debt, and maybe the debt they have is let's say 50,000 kwacha, and it is sinking them because they've mismanaged the resources that God has blessed them with. Even if that person started earning 100,000 kwacha, it will not necessarily follow that they will all their problems will be sorted out. Or what will happen is that they will just raise their level. With 100,000 kwacha, they'll start getting into debt of 500,000 kwacha, and the cycle will continue. So the key is let's learn to be faithful with little, and then God will basically bless us with plenty. I think that's what I would say about some of the principles. Thanks.
Thank you for that. So, is there a way in which people can create a realistic plan? And I mean, people who are in debt, because it's something that may start small, like you were explaining, and then it spiral out of control, and then I find myself indebted. How can a person indebted like me, using myself as an illustration, create a realistic plan to pay off my debt? Um, any realistic plan that one can ride on to pay off debt if I'm
Yes,
indebted and
in fact,
I'm,
that's a
in red?
yeah, okay. Yeah. So maybe let me draw on my experience from the banking sector. Like as banks, we essentially exist to provide finances, to provide loans to individuals, to companies, and so forth. Although, if you look at our loan products, they've all got different names, but
Right,
ultimately, we're basically lending out and people are getting debt. Now, one of the things we do is that when we're giving out debt, even though we take what I might call collateral or security, that is
yes,
not the basis of our credit decision. That is in the eventuality that things go wrong. So what we base it on is what I might call cash flow. Now, I think even for an individual who is in debt, I think the first step for me is what essentially happens even at the country level. I'm sure all of us will know that as a country, Zambia, over the years, we've always gotten ourselves into debt as a country, and we have to come out of it. And to come out of that debt, we hear terms like restructuring, we hear things like debt forgiveness, and so forth. But I want to draw on the principle that when you borrow, you must pay back. Don't borrow and expect the people you borrowed from to forgive you of the debt. So now, if
right,
we take that approach, yeah, even if you sink into debt, I think the starting point for me is to basically come to a point where you call all your creditors or something like that, and basically just be honest that look, this is the debt that I have, and then these are my cash flows. like let's say, let me give an example. If you have borrowed and you get to a stage where your repayment your repayments are supposed to be, for argument's sake, 10,000 kwacha per month, and say your debt is 50,000. Just give an example. So meaning you need to pay 5 installments of 10,000 each, but you
Mm-hmm.
find that you can't afford to pay that, and because you can't afford, you're basically defaulting. You can basically say, look, at the moment, my cash flows are such that I can comfortably be paying, for argument's sake, 7,000 a month. So meaning at that stage, instead of paying, so start paying. If you agree with the person you've borrowed from that to be paying 7,000 a month, it basically means that you pay it over a longer period. Now, what has happened there is that you have what I might call restructured the debt.
Right.
And if I'm to give an example, even in terms of companies, even for us as banks, if we've lent money to a particular company and we see that they are having problems to pay us back, we normally have a sit down with the companies that have borrowed from us, and we basically look at, okay, so how can we help you get out of this debt? So one way is restructuring the debt, maybe reducing the amount to be repaid every month, so that there's less pressure. Another
Right.
thing could be that maybe this company that is in trouble, what they need is they need more financing to basically maybe complete a particular project that will bring in the cash flows. So if that makes sense, it's even possible to lend them more money, even if they're struggling to pay, but you give them more money so that you create capacity in them to be able to pay you back. I think even at individual level, a principle like that can be applied. So the key word there for me is if you're thinking in debt, let there be some sort of restructuring in that debt so that it is aligned to the cash flows that you can afford. And with that, you move debt from debt which you can't afford to affordable debt.
I like what you've just touched on. That look, if you one borrows, and if especially if you're a Christian, really people should not be chasing you for what you owe them. You must honor the obligation of paying back, and that is actually a possibility of a sit down with the people that you owe, so that you can restructure the debt. And so, viewers, this is not just applicable to governments of nations who gets to sit down for a debt restructuring. We have just heard that it is even possible at individual level to come to the table and we restructure the modalities of the repayment plan so that it's workable and we fulfill our obligation. Now, Mr. Cheembela, this next question might be a bit sensitive to some people, but nonetheless, we still need to speak about it. There is an influx or a rapid spread of money lending businesses, some that are even run by believers, so to speak. And that these money lending institutions, they promise quick processing time, some of them faster than commercial banks. What are some of the red flags that you can share with us and the viewers? What that those that one needs to watch out for when considering getting a loan or financial assistance from such institutions or establishments?
No, thanks. I think that's a very good question. So I think from my view is that if you look at this country, Zambia, we're basically a country under the rule of law. And for anyone to get into the business of lending money, they need some sort of license.
Right.
Though I know that there are people that may be lending without any license and so forth. So I think for me, the first thing to look out for is the person I'm getting money from licensed and so for me, that's one. Then the second thing is that when somebody has got need for debt, I think what they normally want is to have access to that money as fast as possible. And
Yes.
sometimes that need to have access to the money as fast as possible can override considerations of borrowing from what I might call a responsible lender. Let me give you an example. If you come to the bank, because as banks, we as much as we lend to companies, we also lend to individuals. So
Yes.
if you come to a bank to get a loan, you may find that a typical bank may take, maybe because of the processes within the bank, it could take, say, for argument's sake, maybe 24 hours or 2 days or even a week
Yeah.
for a loan to be approved and disbursed in a bank. But if you go to, say, a microfinance, and here now I'm not, so I'm stepping down to the next responsible lenders. These are the microfins that are well established in the market. Like, for instance, if I'm looking at Zambia, I would be thinking of microfins like Bayport, Easeway, Microfinance Zambia, Unify, and so forth. They are like they are like a step down from banks now. What those institutions do is that their advantage over commercial banks is the time it takes to get a loan. So you may find that if you go to a microfinance institution, a responsible one, they could tell you they can give you a loan, say, within 3 hours, right?
Right.
But for that efficiency, where a bank is charging you, for argument's sake, 25% per annum, this microfin could tell you will charge you 4% per month. If you annualize it, it becomes 48% per month. So now if you look at 48% and you compare with 25, of course it basically means the debt from this microfin is more expensive. But now sometimes people's needs are such that they want instant. It's as
Emergency
though they
funds,
never planned. It's emergency fund. Now, people who can give you emergency fund without proper checks, uh, it's probably what you might call the people with a Shylock license. Maybe they
Yeah.
are the next best thing after the microphone. So those people can actually give you a loan. If you go to them, they can say within 30 minutes you can get your loan. But those people could probably charge you something like maybe 10% per month. Annualize it, that's a good 120%. Very expensive debt to pay back. But then again, we've got another category. We might call maybe loan sharks.
Yeah.
They unregistered. Those ones, they can give you a loan in seconds. So,
And they are mobile. They
but
will even follow you to your
yes,
location.
yes. But for those, it comes at great cost. First, to begin with, they could even charge you 50% per month. If you analyze it, you don't even have to think of what interest rate that is on an annual basis. And those are the people that create problems for people to basically, where you find that somebody borrowed the 10,000 kwacha. Within 3 months, that 10,000 kwacha has ballooned to 80,000 kwacha.
Yeah.
And this is a person who couldn't afford to have a 10,000 in the first place.
In the
Where will they
first
get the
place, yes.
80,000? Yeah, and some of those loan sharks, they also insist on taking security, which is way more than the loan that they gave. You borrowed
Yeah.
10,000 kwacha, you pledged your car, a car which you bought for 100,000 kwacha. You just find that you lose your car for nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes. So I think for me, when it comes to debt, I think there should also be an aspect of planning. I think let's not get into debt what in emergency, because under emergency people can do things. It's like that advice which is given to us, and I'm not sure if there's a biblical principle to it, but not like you shouldn't make important decisions at the height of emotions, or when you are stressed or you are under duress or there's a gun pointed to your head. You make wrong decisions. So, like, let me give an example. Let's say you know that we are in December. You know
Right.
that in January you need to pay school fees for your children. So plan. If, for instance, you find that the money you have is not enough, and say you can go and borrow. start the process early. Borrow from, say, a commercial bank that will give you the loan at a very reduced rate.
Right.
Don't wait until schools open, your children go to school. By week 3, your children are chased. That's when you start thinking of where to borrow. That is poor planning. So ultimately, it's all about planning. And then also, let me touch on another principle which I could have maybe even highlighted earlier. When
Right.
it comes to debt, it also needs to be matched with the need on hand. Let me give an example of, let's say, a company. If a company wants to borrow money and they want to buy something which will pay off maybe in the next 1 or 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
that company can get a loan for a tenure of, let's say, for argument's sake, 3 years or 4 years, right?
Right.
But now, if the company is just wants to manage what we call in accounting terms, although it's jargon, but I'm sure most of us can relate to it. If a company is just managing working capital, right? So meaning that in that working capital, there is a possibility that, let's say, at the end of the month, when they want to pay salaries, there's a possibility that maybe from some of their sales, the people they sold to may not have paid, and that could create pressure on them not to have money at that month end.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a bank, we can structure a product we call, say, an overdraft, which is more or less like just in case. So it basically
Right.
means this company can have an overdraft marked on their account, and they only get charged if they utilize it. So if all their data pay on time, they may not utilize it. So even for individuals, when, like, let's say you are borrowing for the example I gave, you want to pay school fees. School fees are paid every 3 months. Why would you go and get a 5 year loan to pay school fees for 3 months? There is a huge mismatch. Go and borrow for 3 months, because it means that if you can't afford to pay back your loan within that 3 months, basically it could mean one thing. Maybe you're not taking your children to the school that you can afford. So just something to think about. Thanks.
I like that. We
Mhm.
keep moving and learning. This is Reformed Studios. And as always, we are glad to have you join us from whichever part of the world you might be watching us from. And we would like to hear from you. So please make a comment if you can, or share and like and follow us on various social media platforms. Um, so as we move on, I know it can be difficult because we live in a world where financing really is always not enough, so to speak. So, how can a Christian, Mr. Cheembela, balance saving for the future with giving generously to others? How can one strike a balance? Because in economics, or those of you who are in finance, there's a term that I'm familiar with. They say as income rises, so does the expenditure. So in this case, how can we balance up saving for the future, but then also giving generously to those around us, or even giving to the Lord?
Okay. No, thanks. In fact, actually, that question is great. Let me give us, before I even answer the question, let me give 2 examples. One is from personal experience. The other one is what I read about in the biographies of some of the great men of faith that lived somewhere in the 18th century. But first, let me start with a personal example. Like, when I went to college, I got a scholarship from the mine. Now, that scholarship was,
Okay.
in that college, we were accommodated. We were not paying for accommodation. We were eating 3 meals in that college: breakfast, lunch, and supper.
Right.
And when it came to supplies in terms of books, pens, textbooks, and so forth, the sponsor was taking care of all those things. So the money we were being paid was literally money you can just blow, and uh, you will not suffer because everything else is taken care of. So
Okay.
now, because we're getting that money, what we did, so now here I want to balance the issue of needs and wants. So what would happen is that certain wants, because we had the money, certain wants became needs. So you find that if you go into a room of any of my colleagues, you'll find that in that room there are all kinds of jam, right? Apricots, mixed fruits, and so forth, all kinds of jams. Even when it came to butter, it was the expensive bits that we were buying, not the
Not
what
the
you might
cheap
term as
ones.
the cheap ones. Even things like tea bags. I remember growing up in my parents' house, I only knew that there was quick brew tea or something like that. But I
Okay.
realized that there were different varieties of tea, and I remember one particular tea I liked had some orange flavor to it. So would have that. So you find that there are all those things. Then things like bread. It's like any room you go to, you will see a loaf of bread, like for studying at night. Those that take coffee and all varieties of coffee and so forth. So those were necessities, right? Uh, Things like juice. Each room had juice. Now, 6 months into our scholarship, there was a restructuring, which entailed that we stopped receiving the monthly salaries that we were getting.
Okay.
We used to get like one lump sum, and during, so that one lump sum would be like at the beginning of the year. Then throughout, there was no monthly allowance. So, and that lump sum, when we get it, would blow it because you know that everything will be
It will
provided for
come
any.
later.
Now, eh, yes, it will come. So now, the fact that we didn't have that monthly cash flow, we started rationalizing. It was like things like jams, butter, those became luxuries. Having juice in the room became a luxury. So what we do is at breakfast, we used to get, uh, and in those days, I think it's like the way they used to give us the bread, it's like it wasn't like sliced bread. It's like they cut a big chunk for you. So it's like when you go for breakfast, instead of eating the whole thing, you just eat part of it, and then you save some to come and take at night. So what I'm trying to say there is that when there was money, things which are wants became needs. But when there was no money, the whole thing changed. Now, the example I wanted to also give now from a man of God called John Wesley. I'm sure a number of us may have come across him. Maybe
Right.
his brother Charles Wesley is more popular because he's written most of the glorious hymns that we sing, especially in the Baptist records. But the older brother, John, I think in terms of prominence, he was the more prominent one, I think, in their time. So John Wesley, as a minister, it is said that, let's say for illustrative purposes, he was earning something like £35 per month. And
Okay.
then because of his work, his church decided to increase his salary from 35 to 100. Now, what John Wesley did is that he continued living within the £35 per month. That extra from 35 to 100, he was giving all of it to the cause of Christ. So, but now, for most of us, what tends to happen, me included, when your salary is increased, things that you were admiring at a distance become within reach. So you find that if, let's say, you are comfortable in a salary of 10,000, living comfortably, you are even saving, when your salary becomes 20,000, your expenses also fall. I think that's the point you made, that our expenses follow the income. It's like
Right.
even and the thing I use that the phrase that AMA levels, even the levels adjust or something like that. But it should not be like that. So now, getting back to your question, in terms of how can we balance, I think for me the key, and this is something I use even up to now, it's the whole issue of budgeting. For me, every month I'm expecting my salary. I do a budget. Okay, so this month, what are the basic needs that I need to take care of? Okay, this. What are some of the one-off things that I need to buy in this month, and I don't strain myself in terms of my the things that I need? Okay, I can get this, and that. Now, when you budget, there is even freedom in the way that you go and spend. You know that even if you spend, you are not impacting anything. So now, also when you budget, it's also important to budget for savings. I think for some of us, what we do is we leave savings to chance. It's like after you've spent, what remains is what you want
Is
to
what
save.
is saved.
Now, yeah, but now if you adopt that lifestyle, I can guarantee you will work for 20 years with zero savings because money is always never enough. There is always something that comes up. So if you budget and you stick to your budget, you basically free up a lot of things. Just like for instance, let me give an example of say tithing. When you get paid, if you've budgeted that this portion of my money I'm going to tithe, you tithe without even feeling it that I'm giving away something. But if you decide you know what your tithe will be, you get paid, you just start spending. Spend. After you've spent, then you say, let me tithe. And when you look at the money remaining, you find that if you tithe, you remain with zero. So what do? You default on tithing. Yeah. So for me, the principle here is about planning, financial planning. So you plan for how you spend. Don't just spend at impulse. Even if let's say you go into Shoprite, you pick a trolley. I admire people who, when they're in Shoprite, they've got a list
Or a notebook.
and they are ticking, or a notebook, and they are ticking. But there are also those people who they just move from aisle to aisle, just looking at what will catch their eye. Put it,
Right.
I can afford this, I can afford now. That kind of impulse spending is not good. It will basically not make you be a generous person. You will not save, and you can actually be considered a very stingy person. And like in our societies where we live, even though we don't share our salaries with people, people still have a pretty good idea of where we
Of-
are. And and if you are one of those that just spends at impulse and no matter how much you get, before you get to month end, you are broke and you are waiting for the next payday, and the relative comes and the agent needs something and you can't help them, they'll just consider you stingy. Meanwhile, you don't have because you didn't plan properly. So for me, the key thing is about planning. Even if it comes to, let's say, you are giving money to relatives or whatever, it has to be about planning. Like for instance, let's say something comes with a need which maybe they've always known for a long time. They shouldn't make it an emergency for you. You can
right.
probably tell them, okay, look, I'll plan for it. I'll help you. Uh, Come and see me at this same point next month. Meaning you'll have planned for it and so forth. So ultimately, for me, it's about planning.
Excellent. Thank you for that and for being clear, because sometimes in our African setup, if you tell people that I don't have money, it's very difficult that they will actually take you for that word when they can see other things that are pointing that you actually have money. But the distinction or the lesson that you have given to say that you must have a plan, you must save, and that kind of thing is something that we need to start inculcating, especially in the minds of our young people, so that when they are growing up, they have all these principles and then don't try to fight getting out of a debt trap. But as we get closer and closer to the end of the program, I would like to read something that I picked. Please, I know this, but you can make a comment. It's something that I picked, just a question out of the many things that concern this subject matter. And before you get to answer, or before I ask you the question, I would like to read Second Kings chapter 4, verse 1 to 7, which reads as follows. I'm sure this is a familiar Old Testament narrative. Now, the wife of one of the sons of the prophets cried to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord. But the creditor has come to take my children to be slaves. And Elisha said to her, "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what have you in the house?" And she said, "Your servant has nothing in the house except a jar of oil." Then he said, "Go outside, borrow vessels from your neighbors, empty vessels and not too few. Then go in and shut the door behind yourself and your sons and pour into all these vessels. And when one is full, set it aside." So she went from him and shut the door behind herself and her sons. And as she poured, they brought the vessels to her. When the vessels were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another vessel." And he said to her, "There is not another." Then the oil stopped flowing. Verse 7, she came and told the man of God, and he said, "Go, sell the oil and pay your debts, and you and your sons can live on the rest." And the reason why I read that one, this question takes us back to when you are talking about loan sharks. Then the question would be, would it be a sin for me as Chonde, who is running a money lending business, to seize any collateral from those who fail to pay? And I'm assuming we are churchmates, and bearing in mind the passage that I've just read.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think that passage has got a lot of principles that we can learn from. So if I look at that passage, so this woman was stuck in debt, and somebody had come to foreclose on the collateral. And in this case, her children probably take her into slavery and so forth, as was the custom in that day. So this woman was sinking in debt. Now, one of the things that we see from this woman that we can learn from, which sadly is not something that happens very often in this day and age, you find that when somebody is sinking in debt, people commit suicide. They kill themselves. I remember at one point, I think Pastor Mbewe in his columns on in the Sunday Mail every Sunday, he's done that for many years. It's on the subject we touched on, and I think if there are viewers out there, I would encourage you to look out for those articles. They normally talk about issues around the family. So now, uh, so if you look at this woman, what she did is that she went to seek help. I think for me, when somebody is in debt, so I'll answer it in two ways: from the person who is in debt, and I think from the
Right?
person who has lent. Let's say if it's a Christian. So now, I think if you are in debt, you realize that you need help. I think seek help, and I think for me, as you seek help, it should not be a situation where you are looking for freebies or something like that, but it's where you go to somebody to properly advise you how to get out of that debt. And as I said earlier, even if it means going to have a sit down with the people that lent you. But now flipping the question around, let's say you are a Christian, you are into a money lending business, and you take collateral. You've lent to a brother or a sister, and they've defaulted in their debt. Uh, so ultimately, the solution may not lie in the fact that, okay, no, it's a Christian, I'll just forget about it. It may actually eventually affect you, because sometimes, like for instance, let me give an example of this. The example I gave earlier. You are a Christian, you
Right?
join two village banking groups. They are both Christian village banking groups. So in one, the interest rate is 5%. You go and borrow at 5%. Then you go and invest in another one at 10%, where it's also fellow Christians. Now, let's assume the people you've lent at 10%, they all fail to pay you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so now, when
Hello? Mr. Cheembela, are you there? Mr. Cheembela, are you able to get me? This is Reformed Studios. We have been looking at the topic getting out of a debt trap, and our guest for tonight was Mr. Bobbline Cheembela. We've come to the end of our program, and I would like to thank you, those that have tuned in from whichever part of the world you've been watching us from. Would have loved to get some comments or questions, but nonetheless, we are winding up on our program for this evening. I have been your guest. Chonde Chiluba is my name, and we will see you next week, Wednesday. Good night. Network ya vuta mweba.